The story begins at a fancy art event in a gallery. After the party ends and all the guests leave, a woman named Susan sits alone. She looks sad and distant, as if something is troubling her deeply. Not long after, she returns to her large, luxurious home, but even there, she can't seem to find peace. That night, she can't sleep, so she turns on the television and lets it play until morning. The next day, her head butler informs her that there's a package in the mailbox. Susan opens it and finds a book. It's a novel written by her ex-husband, Edward. Inside, there's a note from him saying that Susan inspired him to write this book after she left him. Edward writes that he wants Susan to be the first person to read it before it's published. He also mentions that he's currently in Los Angeles and hopes they can meet again. The book is titled Nocturnal Animals, and for some reason, the name makes Susan feel uneasy. Sometime later, her current husband, Hutton, returns home. Their relationship seems cold. Hutton didn't attend Susan's gallery event, and the night before, he didn't even sleep in their bed. He claims he was busy with work, but Susan doesn't believe him. Susan asks him to take a short trip together, but Hutton refuses, saying he has to fly to New York again, even though he just returned. We later learn that Hutton's business is struggling, and they might be losing a lot of money. That evening, they attend a dinner party. Susan quietly confides in a friend, sharing her feelings. Despite her luxurious life, a big house, a successful career, and high social status, she still feels unhappy and empty inside. Her friend talks about her own marriage, which makes Susan realize how broken her relationship with Hutton has become. Back home, Susan takes sleeping pills, but instead of falling asleep, she begins reading Edward's book. The novel is dedicated to her, and the story immediately captures her attention. The book opens with a man named Tony, his wife Laura, and their daughter India. They're driving along a quiet road in West Texas. The atmosphere is calm and far from any town. Tony enjoys the peacefulness, but his daughter is frustrated because her phone doesn't work. After a while, two strange cars appear ahead of them. The cars block the road and refuse to let Tony pass. When Tony tries to overtake them, the drivers act aggressive and begin following him. One of the cars hits Tony's car from behind, forcing him to pull over. A few men get out, pretending to help, saying that his tire is flat. They pressure Tony to get out of the car and ask his wife and daughter to come out too, claiming they want to help fix the tire. The situation grows tense. One of the men begins harassing India inappropriately. When Tony tries to stop him, the man punches him. Tony doesn't fight back. Once the tire is fixed, Laura and India try to get back in the car, but before Tony can reach them, the men steal the car and drive away with his wife and daughter inside. Tony is left standing on the road, shocked and helpless. This part of the story deeply disturbs Susan. She closes the book, feeling frightened and heartbroken. She tries calling Hutton, but he's in a hotel with another woman. He speaks to Susan calmly, but there's something off in his tone. She realizes he's lying and likely cheating on her. She ends the call, feeling devastated and betrayed. Back in the story, Tony is still with one of the men, named Lou, who forces him to drive elsewhere, pretending everything is fine. Tony is desperate to find his family. They stop near a trailer where Tony spots his car, but his wife and daughter are nowhere to be found. Lou tells him to calm down, then leaves him stranded alone in the middle of the desert. Tony walks all night along the empty road. The next morning, he finds a small house and asks for help. A police officer named Bobby arrives and begins investigating. Tony shows him where everything happened. Bobby wonders why Tony didn't fight back, since the attackers had no weapons. They search the area together and find a horrifying scene. Tony's wife and daughter are dead, lying on a red couch in the open desert, discarded like trash. Susan stops reading again. She starts crying. Her thoughts drift back to the past, to when she first met Edward in New York. Edward looks a lot like Tony from the book, only without the beard. Both Edward and Susan are from Texas and met in college. Edward came to the city for a scholarship interview, while Susan was in graduate school. They had dinner together, and their feelings for each other quickly grew. Another memory appears. Susan is having dinner with her mother. They argue. Susan wants to marry Edward and move back to Texas, but her mother disapproves. She believes Edward isn't good enough and won't be able to give Susan the kind of life she's used to. She warns Susan that she'll regret it someday and says that Susan is more like her than she wants to admit. Susan denies it, but her mother's words linger in her mind. Back in the present, Susan writes an email to Edward, telling him that his book has deeply affected her and asking if they can meet. The story within the novel continues. Tony receives an email from Detective Bobby with a photo of a man named Turk. Tony recognizes him as one of the men who kidnapped his family. But Turk has disappeared, and no one knows where he is. Months pass with no progress. Tony becomes a different man. He shaves his beard, but his face remains weary and filled with grief. He's still waiting for justice that never comes. One day, Bobby calls with new information. 3 men tried to rob a store. 1 was killed, 1 escaped, and 1 was caught. The man who died was Turk. Bobby asks Tony to come to the station to see if he can identify the man they captured. When Tony arrives, he immediately recognizes him. It's Lou, the same man who abandoned him in the desert. Lou pretends not to know Tony, but Tony reminds him of what happened that night. Bobby informs Tony that Lou will be charged with murder. They have Tony's statement and fingerprints from the crime scene. Bobby also believes that the 3rd man, Ray, is the leader of the group responsible for that terrible night. Now, Tony is entirely focused on finding Ray. He's determined to get justice for his wife and daughter's deaths. Bobby, the kind-hearted officer, promises not to stop until Ray is caught. He knows how much this means to Tony. Meanwhile, Susan is back at her office, but her mind is elsewhere. She looks tired and disoriented. Her assistant reminds her about a meeting, but Susan is clearly distracted. She hasn't slept well for days. As she stares out the window, her thoughts drift once more to the past. Edward used to call her a nocturnal animal because Susan would stay up late, lost in her thoughts. Now she realizes he chose that title for his book for a reason. The story feels deeply personal, echoing their past and everything they once shared. Susan remembers when she was still with Edward. She truly loved him, but never believed he'd succeed as a writer. She thought he needed to be more realistic. Looking back, she regrets how much she hurt him by not believing in his dream. She also remembers choosing Hutton, confident, wealthy, and seemingly perfect. But now, she wonders if she chose the wrong man. Later, at a company meeting, the team debates firing an employee. Susan disagrees, saying the woman deserves another chance. The company once believed in her. A man reminds her that she had wanted major changes. Susan quietly replies that not all changes are good, her tone suggesting she's speaking about her own life. In Edward's novel, Bobby takes Tony to where Ray was last seen. There's no evidence, no fingerprints or record, yet Tony is sure Ray is the man from that terrible night. Bobby and Tony calmly bring him to the scene. When Ray keeps denying everything, Tony breaks down, furious and emotional, and hits him. Susan recalls when Edward showed her his writing. She told him it wasn't good enough and urged him to find a real job. The argument ended with Edward accusing her of being just like her mother, cold and judgmental. Later, still in college, Susan met Hutton, who seemed everything Edward wasn't. She married him, hoping for stability. But now she isn't sure it was the right choice. In the novel, Bobby tells Tony that Ray has been released for lack of evidence, and that he himself has lung cancer with only a year to live. Bobby refuses to retire. He wants to finish this case for Tony, believing it's the last meaningful thing he can do. Susan's mind drifts to a painful memory, going to a clinic with Hutton. She had ended a pregnancy. The baby was Edward's. Sitting in the car, she cried in guilt and regret, then saw Edward outside. He already knew, and he was crying. That moment showed her how deeply she had wounded him, and how much of his pain he poured into Tony's story. In the novel's final part, Bobby takes Ray and Lou, the men from that night, to a remote spot. Sick and weak, Bobby hands Tony a gun and steps outside. Lou tries to run. Bobby shoots him, but Ray escapes. Tony chases him to an old trailer, where Ray mocks him and admits he enjoyed that night. Enraged, Tony shoots him, but Ray hits Tony in the face before dying. Tony wakes up injured and half-blind, stumbles outside, and accidentally falls on his own gun. The gun fires, and Tony dies alone. Susan finishes reading. Sitting silently in the bathtub, she can't stop thinking about Edward. That night, she receives an email from him. He wants to meet. The next day, she carefully gets ready, removes her wedding ring, and looks at herself in the mirror. For the first time in years, she feels hopeful. She goes to the restaurant and waits. But Edward never shows up. Susan sits alone as time passes, tears falling. She thinks of everything she gave up, her love for Edward, their unborn child, her chance at real happiness. Now she has everything she once wanted: wealth, status, success. But it all feels hollow. The silence around her says everything, and the story ends there, and with that the story ends here.